picking up good vibrations.
We are here again. If you haven't seen my review of Book Lovers, go back and watch that so you can get all the background information that I'm not going to include here. But today's book is Beach Read by Emily Henry. I am on a bit of an Emily Henry kick. I started with Big Beautiful Life, which I absolutely adored, and then I read Book Lover. My next review will be on A Million Junes. These reviews, Emily Henry reviews, are going to be a little bit different than my normal review, only because I was basically planning on just cutting ties with this channel. But yeah, I'm a masochist. I'm a sucker for pain, and I just love talking about books, and I can't help it. When this will get edited and posted, I don't know. But overall, I probably have about 10 reviews that are sitting in my archives that need to be edited and posted. So if I don't review another book, we at least have those. And if I only post one a month, that's at least a year more content. So I'll be around for a little while longer. We'll see what the end result is, only because YouTube channels take a lot of work. And this channel, it's a lot of effort on my part, and it doesn't seem that anybody really cares, which is totally fine, because this is really about my soul, not yours, because nobody else will listen to me talk about books, and so I'll just put it here for anybody who does want to listen to me talk about books. Let's get into Beach Read. Like with Book Lovers, it has been a minute since I've read this book, so I just refreshed my memory, and that's why this review is going to be a bit different, because it's not going to be as in-depth, because I was not planning on doing a review on this book. I liked Beach Read. I didn't like it as much as Book Lovers, but that's because I started seeing certain patterns, and it just felt a little bit more superficial than Book Lovers, I'm sorry. But anywho, main female character is January Andrews, and then the main male character is Augustus Gus Everett. The one thing Emily Henry loves to do is an enemies to lovers, which totally fine. But like I said in my last review of Book Lovers, it's a bit formulaic for me. It's a bit too much of a trope, because we don't get a ton of buildup between we're enemies and now we're lovers. But the backstory between Gus and January is that they did go to school together, they went to college together, and they were like rivals of a sense, because they were both really passionate about writing. But Gus is more literary fiction and January is more commercial fiction. And so she always got the sense that he thought he was better than everybody, specifically her, and that he was always really harsh when it came to his critiques and his feedback. But then who became the better known of the two? Gus. So she just isn't a Gus lover. January is in a bit of a bind. Her dad died recently, and while at his funeral, she learns that he had been having an affair. So she, as a romance writer, can no longer write romance because she no longer believes in love. It opens with her kind of imagining a perfect life, like her narrating her perfect life, only for her to then be like, actually, I lied. I don't have that doctor boyfriend. I don't have two loving parents who are still together and whose mother was able to defeat cancer, which she did. But anyways, so I was just like, what in the world is happening here? But all of that goes to the fact that she's not writing, she has no money, and her dad had willed her a beach house that she did not know existed. And she hates this beach house because she believes it was their love nest, which I really liked the twist that came with this affair that the dad was having. I had not expected it, which I really appreciate that, especially in a romance, and especially by a writer who is so formulaic. So when someone's this formulaic, even with their own style, I definitely expect them to be formulaic with the style as a whole. It wasn't so typical, so I really appreciated that. I will say my least favorite character was January's best friend, Shoddy. I thought she was pretty pointless. Shoddy's a chef, and apparently she is too important and too busy to spend any time with January. So for me, I thought she was a waste of space. I thought we could have developed other areas of the story better if we didn't have her storyline, because all we really see from her is that she falls in love quickly and then she's over it and she's moving on. And that because she works in restaurants, she and January never get to see each other, and she's always breaking dates with January. And I value friendship. Like, it might not be a problem for most people, but I value friendship to the extent where it was very problematic for me. I unless that's the point of the novel, where it's more of the friendship focus, I don't want to see somebody who's supposed to have this best friend who's never there for her. I was trying to wrap my mind around January's brokenness, because there's a point where she's trying to go to the grocery store, or I don't know, go to a fast food restaurant, and she can't even afford that. I'm like, so how were you living in New York? How did you drive all the way from New York to wherever this beach house is? Like, how did your dad leave you nothing else except for this beach house? I was trying to figure out the logistics of the whole situation. She gets to this beach house and she's like, I'm not sleeping in any of these rooms. I'm gonna sleep on the couch. She is woken up by a party next door and she's super ticked. And she goes outside. I guess the owner of the house, I'm not sure if she realizes it's the owner of the house, but it is the owner of the house. And sorry, I'm so itchy. Is sitting outside in the dark, and so she starts yelling at him. Obviously doesn't start things off well because he doesn't respond well. But then he goes inside, the music dies, and they're all good. She runs into him again the next day, and I think it was this day, or maybe the next time, she realizes it's Gus. And Gus has been having as many issues getting through his next novel as she is writing hers. So she is so overdue with her extensions. And her publicist / agents is like, you've got to turn something in. You're going to be in breach of contract. And she just can't do it. So then what they do is they make a bet that they will switch genres, and then whoever sells better in their prospective work wins the bet. It's really not a bad bet, but you couldn't pay me to write literary fiction. I hate literary fiction. But it just goes back to the fact that there really took nothing to take them from enemies to lovers. We do meet a woman named Pete, who turns out to be Gus's aunt, and Pete runs some kind of store, but she also has a book club. So she invites January, and in this book club, Gus is there, and January is under the assumption that Gus is the guest of honor, and that he is totally expecting them to be talking about his book, and then they're talking about something that's not his book, and she can only imagine what he's thinking, because this was not what he showed up for. I'm trying to remember. I think I skimmed a little bit, or at least I zoned out, but I don't think he was actually there as the guest of honor. I think he was actually there for the book club. We get a little bit of background on his parents and how they had a volatile relationship throughout this summer. So what they do with their bet is they are going to teach the other person the ways of writing in their respective genres. So she takes him on kind of like romance novel expeditions. He has been looking into a suicide cult, and there was a moment where I was, because he was very obsessed with the suicide cult, and I was like, did his mother join this cult? But it was not his mother. We did interview a guy who talks about how his parents joined this cult, and over time, his dad, who had been resistant at first, was the one who got really into this cult, and the mother realized the danger they were in, so she got them out of there. And then there was like an explosion or something, and like everybody died, or at least his dad died. It destroyed their trailer. But he takes her to this cult, and he takes her to talk to these people about that cult. And so and actually I thought her book sounded really interesting. It reminded me of the Night Circus in a lot of ways, but she writes a book that's almost autobiographical. So it's about her inner turmoil, and it's mirroring her family dynamics, but on a literary level, and dealing with circus people. And I forget what his book was about. But obviously, they start falling in love over the course of this. But he's kind of resistant. He's resistant to marriage and to commitment. She doesn't really know why. She discovers, I think it was Pete, or maybe somebody connected to him, mentions his ex-wife. And this angers January, and frankly, I thought it was a little unjustified. I didn't understand why she was freaking out so much. She basically felt betrayed that he never mentioned the fact that he was getting a divorce. And the wife, the ex-wife, had cheated on him with his college roommate, whom January remembered, and she was like, I can't believe they got together. Turns out that the ex-wife realized, not the best guy, and I'd rather be with Gus. So she is trying to woo Gus back. Pete, and I guess Pete must own a bookstore, because she wants Gus and January to hold a book signing at this bookstore. And so it is at this book signing that January sees the ex-wife, and the ex-wife is beautiful, and he kind of goes off with his ex-wife. And I don't know, I thought that was a little underdeveloped. Like, her feelings kind of came out of nowhere. I mean, honestly, like, who cares that he I mean, this is from somebody who's never been in a relationship, so I guess I can't relate, but like, who cares that he was married and didn't tell you about it? It's been like a couple months. Except that this is a romance novel, and we all understand there's going to be a happily ever after, and this is like a super serious relationship. So it's important to know that he was married. And I guess the wife had been dragging out officializing the divorce. The thing with the beach house is that January is preparing to sell it, which I thought was a shame, because the dad had renovated this beach house for her, so she could have this house. And so I don't remember quite exactly if it's out of spite that she was selling this beach house. We see her having a little bit of engagement with Sonia, who was the mistress, which apparently Sonia actually was at the book club, and January was like, I'm not having this, I'm getting out of here. Sonia has been trying to get in touch with January, and January doesn't want anything to do with her. The dad had written January letters, and this is what Sonia had handed January at the funeral. And I guess January it's been a year or so, January hadn't read this letter yet. Eventually, Sonia corners January and is like, what you think you know is not what you know. We were never in a relationship. That's the essence of what she says. She and the dad had been high school sweethearts. They broke up in college. He had met January's mother whilst January's mother was going through her cancer and her cancer treatments and her remission, and then it showing back up. He needed an outlet of sorts, so he bought this beach house, and he would come to this beach house, and this is where Sonia lived. And so they reconnected, and it was the first time that the mother had cancer. they were on the verge of reconnecting and getting into a relationship when I think the mother got better. He never actually had an affair. They basically picked up where they left off on a very deep friendship. Maybe she asked January, "You don't know this?" And January was like, "No." There was something Sonia assumed January would have known, but only if January had read all these letters that her dad had written her. I believe the letters were in a safe, which January's like, "I don't know the code." Of course, Sonia would know the code because this was her love nest. Turns out it was her birthday, which just goes to show who her dad's priority was. It was his daughter. She reads these letters, she reconnects with her dad, she forgives him. I would have liked a little bit more about the mother. Frankly, I thought that the book she was writing, as I said, was really interesting. And because it was a mirror, a reflection of her own life, I thought if we had gotten more of that, that would have been another really good way of delivering information without outright saying the information, just in case there's people out there that are like, "Don't give me the exposition." Somewhere in all of this, Gus and January make up. Shoddy actually comes to visit. They both finish their books, which I did have a question about this. As somebody who is writing a book myself and who has done some research in the publishing industry, I know that agents can represent multiple genres, but many times, if you've an agent for X genre, if you then write a book for Y genre, will that be acceptable? For January, who is a romance writer, to then turn in a literary fiction book, which is so different, would that have fulfilled her contract? I mean, I know this is a book, and this is not the stuff that we're supposed to be worried about, but that is something that makes a book successful for me or not, is have we done our research? Like, is it plausible for the things that you're putting in here to actually occur? And as somebody who is a published author, which is why I'll believe it, you'd think that whatever she's putting in here is actually plausible. So they both finished their novels, and while both novels do really well, Gus's does better. I was like, I don't know how I feel about that. So I think it was, hers did super well, but his stayed on the bestsellers list longer. And then something along those lines means that he's making more money off of his book than she is. And it's interesting too, because even though it's a literary fiction novel and it's not a happily ever after novel, he, or at least to her, he's like, "Oh, but of course you gave them a happily ever after." And she's like, "No, I didn't." And he's like, "Well, if I had written this book, this is how my book would have ended. For you, you tied up all the loose ends, and this is how it ended, and it was essentially a happily ever after," which I thought that was a really interesting observation. So they're together, they've written their books, they're doing well, and I believe she moved into his house. If anything, she sold the beach house. And that's it. Have you read Beach Reads? Have you read Emily Henry? What do you think? Do you have anything to add? Because I know I skipped a lot. But as I said, it's probably been a month or two since I've read this book. So I'm just proud of myself for doing what I did. Bye.